One area that made major progress during the war was the diagnosis of mental illness. It affected many thousands of casualties, including a high percentage of officers. For the first time, it was widely recognised. Exposure to the horrors of battle placed terrible stress on soldiers. Shell shock became a major problem, both to the army and to the medical profession. Lawrence Gameson's diary records a typical case.
I was searching a shell hole for a body, scratching around. A couple of shells went overhead, and I saw them fall near two men from B Company who were working in the open. One man fell, and the other was just a boy, really. He escaped, and I sent him back to the dugout for my stuff while I held on with the wounded man. And he was hurt quite badly. Shrapnel. He'd lost a hand, a lot of blood. Anyway, later I thought the incident was closed, but that night I was called out to see the other one, the boy.
He's gone.
He was all over the shop.
I can have gone. Josie.
Shh. Now, this is morphia.
It's a rabbit. It's only a small one.
Now, this will help you sleep.
So I'm hurt.
Shh, you'll be fine. Ryan, his name was. You know, everyone said he was normal. Always up to scratch. Used to seeing people hit. Seeing his friends hit. But this one isolated incident had broken him. He just...
Nervous disorders had been treated before the war, but the army didn't have much sympathy. They believed to suffer a nervous complaint showed a lack of moral fibre. Army doctors, like all officers, had a duty to keep discipline.
So what you seem to be saying is that if there's no blood, there's no wound.
Well, I'm saying it somewhat helps a diagnosis, yes. I had a man came in this morning, holding his guts. Bayonet wound. Now he, I'd say, we should excuse from duty.
I think your boy's a coward, Lawrence.
I don't know if he's a coward or not, I don't know. All I know is that we've men going over the top every day, and there's something brave. And we're not going to win this war if the whistle blows and boys like him stand skulking on the fire step. It's windy, had a shock. So, you do your job. You tell him, pull yourself together, and over you go.
What about concussion?
What about concussion?
Oh, bomb goes off. They're clear, just. No blood, no shrapnel, but somehow they're knocked off balance. Concussed. Do you think they're fit to fight?
Except, it's not always as simple as that. And there isn't always a bomb that goes off just at that moment. That's what makes it so difficult. Gunner so-and-so. He's been here for months. He's lived through bombardments, advances, retreats. He's tough as old nails. Takes a machine gun post, single-handed. This man is not windy. And then, one day, he's standing in the cookhouse, and he sees a sausage pop on the stove. It looks a bit like flesh. And he starts to cry like a baby. And he doesn't stop crying. I'd like to think that man somehow is wounded. I just don't think any of us understand how.
As the war progressed, more and more cases of shell shock were reported. 80,000 cases in all. And it wasn't because of physical wounds. Rather, soldiers and officers alike were being made sick by the surroundings, by the sights, sounds and experiences of trench warfare. The War Office was so worried they tried to limit the damage. In 1917, just before the Battle of Passchendaele, they tried to ban the use of the words shell shock.
The medical officer will not record any diagnosis. He will enter the letters NYDN, not yet diagnosed, nervous, and will note any definitely known facts about the true origin or the previous history of the case. In no circumstances whatever will the expression shell shock be used verbally or be recorded.
We have to call all our nervous patients either wounded or sick. And all the time, there's this pressure to call them sick because only the wounded will get a pension. Our judgment has always been questioned. Now, you think you're a doctor. It's your job to find out what's wrong. And then some memo comes through and it dawns on you. No, it's not. Your job's to close your eyes and pass them fit for duty.
But the war did help the study of mental illness. Because soldiers with nervous disorders were an embarrassment and bad for morale, many were taken away from the front line and kept in special camps. After Passchendaele, one camp was set up holding 5,000 men. Here, though attitudes were basically unsympathetic, some doctors did take the opportunity to study nervous disorders further. As interest grew, specialist hospitals were set up back in Britain. This footage shows victims of shell shock being treated at Netley Hospital in Southampton. The treatments developed here were written up in the Lancet. They included role play, talking, and the use of electric shocks to persuade the limbs to work again.
Our experience has shown that prolonged re-education is unnecessary, and we are now disappointed if complete recovery does not occur within 24 hours. Men are now fit to return to duty or to earn their living in civilian life in a few weeks, instead of having to be invalided from the service.
The emphasis was still on finding a quick cure and not paying a pension. Many patients with shell shock were accused of malingering or cowardice, the penalty for which could be death.
The boy, Ryan, 3 days after the incident with the shell, he was himself again, or seemed to be. But then word came down the wire there was to be a push, and the bombardment started again to soften up Jerry before the boys went over the top. And in all the noise and confusion, Ryan just left. He just walked away. The next day, after the push was over, half his mates dead, he was found 5 miles behind the line, sitting with his feet in the ditch, holding his rifle like a fishing rod. When asked what he thought he was doing, he said, "I'm waiting for a bite." They put him in lockup and charged him with cowardice. Where are we?
What do you mean, where are we? He's soft.
Tell me.
Waiting for Dad. He said when he gets back, we can go to the brook. Do you want to come?
Who? Who am I? Who are you talking to?
Joe.
Who's Joe? Your brother, Joe?
Joe. I always go fishing on a Sunday.
I'm not your brother.
Do you not want to come then?
I've seen malingerers. But I don't think I'm green. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 have slipped past me, I don't know. But this boy was not malingering. And he didn't know he'd left the battle, left his mates. And now he would be tried, and if found guilty, he could be shot.
Officially, no sentence of death could be carried out without the approval of a medical officer. As the Army Commander-in-Chief, Field Marshal Haig, made clear.
When a man has been sentenced to death, if there is any suggestion he is suffering from shell shock, the sentence will not be carried out unless the medical board expresses the positive opinion that he is to be held responsible for his actions.
But the official court-martial records show many cases where no medical evidence was taken. This is what Haig said about one plea for mercy on the basis of shell shock.
How can we ever win if this plea is allowed?
Are you all right?
No, I'm not actually.
What is it?
Ryan. Sentenced this morning. Colonel says he's sorry. He knows I was interested in the case, but there wasn't time to call me.
But you had the evidence. Was he guilty? Will they... No.
No, I don't know. Maybe they'll just horsewhip him and bring him back up the line and force him over the next push so he dies a hero. My evidence was all he had.
346 British soldiers were court-martialed and shot for cowardice in the First World War. No medical evidence was called for the last British soldier to be tried for desertion. He was shot on the 7th of November 1918, just 4 days before the end of the war. So, was the First World War good for medicine? Certainly many civilians were worse off medically. In many hospitals, ordinary patients were sent home to make way for sick and wounded soldiers. Most doctors and nurses were taken out of civilian life and sent to the front, where many of them were also killed, alongside the soldiers they were sent to treat. But the extraordinary demands of the war forced nurses and doctors to find new ways of working on a large scale. It increased the specialist knowledge of doctors because they saw so many similar cases, and the lessons learned and the skills acquired benefited civilians after the war.